The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, AFTER members, and welcome to yet another Webinar Wednesday. I am very pleased to have delivering today's content with me, Jo Hanlon. So welcome, Jo. Well, team, my name's Joanne. I'm Head of Marketing and Communications at AFTER. And firstly, I must apologise. For some reason, we've got some bad internet connection today and I'm unable to share my webcam, which is disappointing because I did brush my hair and I did put mascara on for you all. But never mind, we're able to see our presenter, Jo. We had quite a few of our members request a webinar on the topic of difficult handling conversations and how you can effectively deal with this. And so to cover this, we have brought in expert Jo Hanlon, who is the founder and MD of Mind Your P's, which is a boutique HR and business coaching and advisory company. Now, Jo is delivering the webinar from her beautiful location up in Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. So very jealous, Jo.
Beautiful day it is too, Jo.
Now, Jo is really passionate about helping people who are committed to taking action and who truly care about themselves, their team and their business, and want to do this using a blend of head, heart and intuition. And no doubt on today's webinar, you'll really feel the passion that Jo has about improving people and businesses. Jo has for many years worked across businesses, across sectors, but she has also worked within travel. And Jo, I understand that you have worked in the past with companies like Travel Partners.
I have. It was great working with those guys.
And Jo works with both individuals, teams, and small and medium enterprises to boost productivity, challenge assumptions, help businesses and people think differently, open communication channels, and really cultivate positive work cultures. And, this is a really great time to have Jo in, considering that we have been through such a difficult and challenging time. Now, before I hand over to Jo, I'll just mention that this webinar was fully subscribed. So thank you for everybody for setting aside an hour of your day to join us. You are all in listen-only mode. However, we do invite questions. So Jo will probably talk for maybe half an hour to 45 minutes, depending where the conversation takes her. And then we'll reconnect at the end to address any questions that you have. So please feel free to use the question toolbox to ask any questions. I will definitely try and get my webcam working so that when we do the Q&A at the end, you can also see myself and Jo. And if you found this webinar useful and you think it would be valuable for your colleagues, Jo has kindly enabled us to record the webinar and we will place it on the AFTER website so that you can share it with your colleagues or even rewatch it yourself. So Jo, I think that's enough from me. I'll hand over to you. Everyone, I hope you have a warm cup of tea and just sit back and enjoy the conversation. Thanks, Jo.
Thank you, Jo. Hopefully everybody can hear me well. If you can't, please just put that down in the chat box and Jo will let me know. Lots of Jo's today. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this webinar with you. It is one of my favourite topics, I guess. It's something that I have to participate in and choose to participate in on a regular basis with my clients. But it's also, and it's whether it's to do with individuals and them having difficulty with staff members or sometimes even personal issues, or whether it's actually dealing with clients. But different conversations, it's always interests me how these things are called soft skills because they seem to be the hardest things to do. So to jump right in, alrighty. So I will be going quite fast today, so my apologies for that. Where are we going? I can't go next. Why can't I go next? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So the learnings for today are these key topics. I'm going to touch on your wonderful brain and how it relates to body hacks, some things you can do to put yourself in the right place when you're having difficult conversations. The next part is about understanding yourself and others better, and that's really all about adapting your approach to the people that you're going to be having conversations with. The third part is about deep listening, and deep listening is a subject that we probably don't talk about that often or think about that often. So I just want to introduce you to that concept. Asking smart questions, setting realistic expectations, because these are all interconnected when it comes to having difficult conversations. As I mentioned before, I probably will be going quite fast. I've got a lot of information I need to pass to you, but you will be getting an outline of the slides later, as well as a recording. So hopefully if you need to, you can go back over that and get some more information. The other thing, I will be talking in generalizations and making a few assumptions. So please excuse that. I don't normally like to do that, but again, because of time constraints, I will have to do that. So please don't take me to task on that. So I guess the reality is that normal dynamics, human dynamics are complicated enough, and they've been further complicated by the natural events that have been happening in the last few months, since February, March, depending on where you've been. And it's also even before that around bushfires and a lot of the stress that people have been going through. So I can only imagine that it's continuing to be really difficult for you in the travel industry. A number of times a day, I would imagine you're having lots of difficult conversations with clients who are quite disappointed about their travel plans being delayed or postponed or even cancelled or having to be changed, and important pieces of their life having to be changed so significantly. It's also to do with you and your own conversations in your own business, no doubt, around your staff and how you can work with your staff and what the future may look like for them and for yourselves as business owners. You know, my heart, I guess, goes out to you really as you do the best that you can in negotiating this difficult time, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. So, you know, there's a lot of us with you guys, and just hope things loosen up soon. Alrighty, first topic I want to talk about, your wonderful brain. Some of you may know quite a lot about your brain. Some of you may not. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of introduction. So if I can talk about your forebrain, which is this bit here, your cerebrum, it's the command center. This part of your brain is all around decision-making, planning, memories, thinking, and imagining. And they're all intellectual activities. The midbrain, the bit up here, that controls reflex actions and voluntary actions, such as eye movements, and houses the structures that let you feel. So that's your hypothalamus and your hippocampus. And that is actually where your memories are stored. And a little bit of trivia for you, the hippocampus of London taxi drivers apparently is significantly larger than most of us, because they have generally in the past, before GPSs came in, they needed to remember every single street. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. The hindbrain, which is the back, which is the top of the spinal column and the brain stem, that controls your gross motor functions, such as riding a bike, our respiration, our heart rates, and all the things that we learn and we do with our bodies. So why are these important? I guess the thing to know is that when we're in times of stress, and the more stressed we are, it does affect our brain. There's all sorts of hormones that circulate around our body, generated by that stress. And there's also a lot of physiological things that are happening in our brain. And when we're actually uptight and rushed and stressed about things, it basically shuts off the blood supply to that decision-making command center in the front of our brain, which makes it quite difficult to make balanced decisions, to respond rather than react. Response being something that happens when you can plan and think, whereas reaction is more to do with something that just happens to you and you react instinctively. So I wanted to start with this because I just really wanted to give you a couple of body hacks, because if we can actually make some adjustments to our bodies before we start really important conversations, especially if we know we're going to have a difficult conversation, often these are some really good things to do. It's about slowing down and stopping. It's about getting in touch with ourselves what our breathing is like. Are we breathing fast in anticipation of a bit of a discussion or a fight, perhaps? Or are we breathing slowly and deeply? And it's trying to slow that down. How are you feeling? Are you anticipating with a bit of fear, a bit of worry, concern? And what are you thinking? Are you anticipating? Are you feeling? So they're all connected, and it's really important to stop, reflect, adjust what you need to do. So slow your breathing down consciously. Take some 2 or 3 big deep breaths, because they can really help slow your heart rate and get you in the right space. And then you can engage in a conversation. So it's about thinking of yourself holistically as a person, rather than just picking the phone up, engaging the mouth, and then talking, because that's where sometimes things can come a little unstuck. And we'll refer a little bit back to that a little bit later on as well. Alrighty. So I want to talk to you about DISC. So this is all about getting to know yourself a little bit more. Did you know that non-verbal cues actually convey 65 to 93% of interactions between us, especially when emotions and feelings are involved? So if you're on the phone or on having a Zoom conversation, you're likely to pick up some of those things with your clients, but you're probably not going to pick up all of them, which means that you are going to have to be even more aware of what you're saying and how you're responding to clients. And because so much of that is picked up non-verbally, it's really important to consider what you're going to say. So one of the things that I use, and I'm looking at my other screen because that's where I've got my key slide, is a tool called DISC. This is a fantastic model. It's simple, and my style. I love simplicity. It makes it really easy for me to remember and recall and utilize when I need to. Research has shown that we all usually prefer to use a certain work style. Now, we can use either 1, 2, 3, or 4, and there's 4 main styles with 3 subsections, but I won't go into those subsections. But we can, what we call, flex to different styles when we need to, but essentially, especially in a situation that might be uncomfortable for us or new for us or whatever, we will definitely go to our first style or our preferred style. Now, I don't use this because it helps me put people in boxes. Why I use it is it helps me remember and think about how I can better use some of the information I have. And I'll give you a couple of people reading tips as we go through this process. And this will allow you to know not just yourself better, but also your clients and the people you're interacting with better. So you can then adapt your style to how you are going to talk to them, and maybe how much information you do or don't give them. The other benefit of this sort of thing is we can learn to take things not so personally. If we're aware that people are coming from a position with different priorities, different motivators, and different fears from us, because it's easy to assume that everybody sees things from the way that we see them, but they don't. So the more we can understand different people's points of view and put ourselves in their shoes, it's about empathy and it's about understanding, which can open the conversation up a lot more. So we can make sure we can understand then that people's responses or reactions when they get angry with us or when they're getting argumentative, it's not necessarily about us. It's actually largely more to do with how they're feeling about the situation and what their fears are. So let's go into one of the styles. So a top left-hand style is one that's called dominance. So the reasons that we actually use these words is not so that we can actually put people, again, in boxes or label them so much, but what it actually does is it gives us the opportunity to understand. So what you will notice with these people is they're very active, they're very fast-paced, they're very assertive, they're dynamic, and they're bold. They can appear pushy, they can ask lots of questions, they're very, they can be seen to be blunt, short, and they can really get quite a lot of people's backs up. These people are very process focused, and they do want to know about timelines and what their best options are for their travel plans or for what they're going to be talking to you about at the time. These people have fears such as loss of control, being taken advantage of, and vulnerability. So these people are not likely to tell you what their deep fears are, and they're not likely to be explaining to you how they're feeling about the situation that they're in at the moment and the losses that they may be feeling. These people like power and authority, competition, power and success. So what does this mean, and what might be some of the better ways to deal with these people? It's really about taking the time to find out what their key concerns are. Don't waste their time, but ask targeted questions and help them get to the point of what's going on. They don't generally want a long drawn-out conversation. They will expect to be asked questions, and they will appreciate you giving them realistic timeframes and honest information. Even though sometimes they may not like what you say, they will appreciate that you're trying to get them the information that they need to. They are likely to be maybe a bit pushy and demanding, and so it is important to know what you can and what you don't know so that you can then say where you might need to go and get some information. So be transparent and honest with these people so that they know what they can expect from you and what you're talking to them about. Oh, no, I'm not. Moving on. Yes, I am. Okay, influence. So this is the top right-hand side of the circle. These people are our social butterflies. They're normally very friendly, they're chatty, they want things done, they are fast-paced as well. They're also about being assertive and bold, but they're likely to do it in a more friendly. If you look on the right-hand side of the slide, they're more accepting, people-focused, empathising and receptive and more agreeable. So they're more likely to want you to be a friend with them, to find out what's going on in their personal life, and they're wanting to share that with you because that's important to them. Their style, they're motivated by social recognition, group activities and friendly relationships. So if you're having to talk to them about disrupting their travel plans, they're likely to be really quite upset about this potentially because their fears are loss of influencing, being left out and socially isolated. So a lot of them will have been feeling a lot of pain over this last few months. They fear disapproval and being ignored. So if they're talking to you about their key events and they're really wanting to make sure that everybody's going to have a good time when they go and have their wedding or their party or whatever, that's actually going to be a real source of stress for them. So what you can do with these people is to have frequent communication with them, to keep them in the loop, keep them updated, give them information and expect to have that bit of a chat because they will want to know what's happening with you and how you're coping, as well as want to tell you with what's happening with them. They often need an ear and a sounding board to work through their issues. They will want to share their experiences, but they will also need to know when they can get the information that they want because it is about for them also taking action, getting results and making things happen. They may ring several times to get the information that they need, and they will need to feel that you value them and that you are their friend and their ally and that you're trying to work with them on their behalf. These people on the bottom right-hand side of the circle, we've given them the name steadiness. These are your helpers. These are the people that are always wanting to make sure they're contributing and supporting and maintaining status quo. They don't like change very much. They're more thoughtful, they're more calm, they're more methodical and moderate paced, as well as being friendly and concerned about people and being agreeable. So these people are wanting to, they're concerned about their team, they're concerned about their family and others, and even more than they're worried about themselves. So for them, stability and support is key. Their fears are sudden change, disharmony, and offending others. So be prepared to take time with them to help them understand why the changes need to happen. Give them as much advance warning as you possibly can when changes are going to occur as much as you can. You are going to have to spend some time finding out from them what their key concerns are. They don't want to worry you. They don't want to put their stuff on other people. So it is going to be important that you spend the time and draw out of them what their main concerns are, and then give them some reassurance and some support in the conversations that you're having. They won't want to waste your time because they know you're busy, but the problem with that is that you may not get all the information that you need to give them the solutions. So then that's where frustration and angst can build. It's all about the communication style and adapting your style to different people. And when you can do that, you can then have a better chance of working best with them and meeting their requirements. The last main style in this model is called the conscientious style. These people are motivated by data facts and a lot of detail. So as I've been going through these styles, I'm sure you're reflecting on some of the people that you've been talking to and having conversations with. So if you can, these people, if they're slower paced, they're calm, methodical and careful. They do ask a lot of questions though. They can be quite skeptical and they can be challenging. So again, it's really important to recognise that they're not challenging you because they don't believe you necessarily. It's just that they need more data, because for them, one of the biggest fears is being wrong. So if they're talking to a group of people and they're sharing information, they don't want to be wrong, and they want to make sure that they've got the facts right so that they can then pass that on to other people that are important to them as well. Ideas for the better communication with these people: provide fact sheets, give them the data and the sources, so tell them where you've got the information from, give them access to subject matter experts as much as possible, and be really clear and precise. Deal in facts, not feelings. These people obviously are feeling underneath, but they can bury those feelings quite deep. And so just remember that even though they might appear quite, I guess, reserved or shy, but they're asking lots of questions, it is because they have got a lot of worries that are going on underneath. But just be careful. These people can take up a lot of your time because they like to ask detail, and they may also want to verify a lot of that information time and again. So make sure that you have, depending on your time frames and how much time you've got with them, you might be able to put them onto other people or other sources. Remember, they also really love to share their own knowledge and expertise with you, and they might try and bog you down with long explanations or details about what they're going to do to sort their problems out. So just be aware of that, and make sure that if you know that you're ringing them, that you've got the data up front and that you've got that all at hand to provide to them, and they'll feel a lot more comfortable about that. It's all about meeting expectations. Generally in the past, in what research has shown and what I've found is that whenever I'm talking to people and trying to help them resolve conflict or angry situations, difficult conversations, it's because either assumptions have been made by one party or the other, or people haven't talked about expectations and therefore they haven't been able to meet them. So being able to think, now, is this person fast-paced or are they slower-paced? Listen to their speech. Are they wanting a lot of detail, or are they just wanting the top-line information and just saying, oh, you sort it out, and you send me the information and tell me how it's going to work out? Just by adapting your style to those different styles can actually really help you understand not to try and bog down a D style or a dominant style with a lot of conversation, because they're rushing on to the next thing and they don't want to be bogged down by all that information. And then your influence style, they're wanting that friendly conversation, they're wanting you to take the time, and if you're in a rush and you're wanting to move them on because you've got 10 other phones ringing or you've got other things on your mind, then they might take that as a bit of a push off. So, or you're trying to close them off. So it's about planning the time that you can have with each person and providing them with the information that they need. I think the other thing is, in reality, it's not just about their style too, because at the beginning I also mentioned that you have your own style. We all have our own styles. So what's also really important, the other piece of the puzzle, is you, when you're dealing with either your staff or your clients. So it's about you making sure that you get your own needs met by taking the time to get the information, or saying, can I get back to you later, or really just using your own knowledge of yourself, because the better you know yourself, the better you can manage yourself and your own responses and minimise a reaction, and the more aware you can be of other people, then the more helpful you're going to be able to be to them. And I would imagine that across in the travel industry, in the AFTA group, there's a larger number of all these different types of personality styles, which can be really useful because you can match people, agents with clients, and if you need to, and just help different people, help you sort out or approach somebody whose style might be really different to yours. So what you have control over is your response, remember that, but what you can't control is everybody else and their reactions or their responses, but you can influence them by just spending a bit of time thinking and planning beforehand. Okay, so let's go on to the next piece of this, which is about listening. So, are you mindful or are you mindful? Is your mind so full of things that you're not actually able to listen to what is being told to you, or is your mind full of what you're trying to be thinking about and your own expectations and what's worrying you right now, or is it actually empty enough to listen to another person? So this is what we're going to talk about now. Is your body present but your mind not? Okay, so there's a guy called Oscar Trimboli, and he's got this model, again, another model which I really like, again, simple but very clear, called deep listening. And he talks about 4 listening fails, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it, and summarizing them are these 4 different styles. So as you can see, there's the lost listener. I'm sure that some of you have either been in that situation, you find yourself in that situation, trying to do 10 things at once. The problem with that is you're physically present, but you're mentally elsewhere. And I don't know about you, but what I'm finding is that if I'm doing more than one thing at a time, I'm not doing a very good job of listening. So one of my fails out of all of these is the interrupting one and the lost one. So it's about stopping, listening, and being present to what's being said to me. These listeners have their minds on the last job, their last thought, when they're having the next coffee, maybe on the fight that we have with our partner, or thinking about the last conversation we had and what else, all these things that we need to get done, especially if it was a really difficult conversation before you jump into another difficult conversation. So the lost listener, their attention is everywhere except this conversation. Some of you may be thinking, oh my gosh, that's me. No, don't worry, we all go through all of these at various times. It just depends on how long we stay there and how conscious we are of them, and then what we do about them. The next one is the interrupting listener. The interrupting listeners are so focused on finding a solution to the problem that they tend to finish the speaker's sentence before they have even got it out. So we try and rush them, and then we're trying to rush them to find a solution to the problem. And what happens here is we're not listening, we're not hearing what the person's got to say, and if we get off the phone, they may be sitting there going, I had so much more I need to say, they didn't even ask me that question, they were too busy telling me what they thought rather than actually finding out what my needs are. And I'm sure a lot of you are very good at doing this, but there's no doubt that at times we can fall into that interrupting listener trap. The third one is the shrewd listener. This is where we are so focused on solving the problem that we are just busy inside our own heads, and we're anticipating what the problem is. It's very similar to the interrupting listener, but we're doing it inside our own heads rather than actually interrupting verbally. So again, we're not there, we're not present, we're solving the problem, we've jumped forward 5 or 6 steps when that person is thinking, well, that's actually not the way I was going anyway, I actually wanted to go down that way. So again, if you're a shrewd listener, it's about thinking based on experience. We've gone down this path before. This is a conversation I had with that last person. This was the solution that we made for them. So it's probably going to be the same solution here. And it's really important, again, to stop, to listen, and to be part of this conversation, not the last several conversations. And the last one is the dramatic listener. These folks, they listen very intently in every detail, but then they try and stop you. And they want to delve into every single piece of the detail, whether it's relevant or not. They want to ask the questions. They want all the what happened then and what happened next, and oh my gosh, that must have been terrible. And these people can be very distracting. We can be very distracting if we're being dramatic listeners with our clients. And rather than, especially if you've got a D-style person, all they want to do is get the information out there, give you the information, then leave you deal with it. If we're trying to be a dramatic listener and draw it all out because that's the way that we like to do things, that's not going to be very helpful for our clients. So it's really important to be aware of that. As I mentioned, though, we are all guilty of those. We can all be guilty of those, and sometimes all within 10 minutes. So it's about actually thinking again. We go back to the body hack, stop, think about where is my head space, where am I at? Is my head still back there, or is it actually ready for this new conversation? So what makes a good listener? Oscar Trimboli says deep listening. And what are the steps to deep listening? So it's about readying yourself, and that comes back to the body hacks. Stop, reflect, take a couple of deep breaths before you pick the phone up, whether it's them ringing you or you ringing them. Be aware of how you're feeling, what headspace you're in, because that will impact how you come across and what your voice sounds like, as well as possibly the first words that you say. So adjust your mindset if you need to, and clear your head and just be ready for that next conversation. And it only needs to take 2 or 3 seconds when you get very practiced at it. The next step is listening to the content. Listen to the content of the conversation. So be aware of those 4 listening fails. So rather than being in your head about what you think the solution is, it is actually about listening to the content, what they're asking, what they're saying, what their expectation is, what their questions are. And that's, again, take notes if you have to, so that you can make sure that you're clear on the content and it's their content, not yours. And then you can answer the questions. Listen to the context, or think about the context of the situation. That is, what is happening at the time. As we know at the moment, this whole COVID situation that continues to evolve in some countries or states is really taking up an enormous amount of our time. And yes, it's easy to think that that's the cause for all of the conversations or all of the difficult conversations that we're having. But as we know, it's not the only cause. So think about why are they asking these questions, or why do they want this information right now? Be aware, are there time constraints? Is there new information that's come out? Are key dates coming up? So what else can you ask to get clearer on the context of the situation? Because you need to know how important those plans are for your clients, and then that can also, if people feel that you've heard them and that you've taken on board how important it is to them, they're more likely to be comfortable with what you're going to be doing next. It actually also gets you to help be clear about the actual urgency rather than an emotional urgency. So it helps you clarify and clear the facts from the emotions around it, and again allows you to respond appropriately. So one that's maybe we don't think about very much is listen to what is not being sent or was not said. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our mouths can speak around 125 words a minute. However, our brains work at 3 to 4 times that. So if you've got somebody that's going full tilt and they're thinking all this stuff and they think they've explained to you what their questions are or their situation is, but in actual fact, they may not well have. So especially if they are really fast-paced, either in that top level circle, a D or an I style. So ask them at the end of the conversation or towards the end of their blurb what else it is they need to say. Repeat back to them what they've said to you, what you've understood, and make sure that they then they'll go, oh, I thought I told you that, or they can add any information in that they may be left out because their brain was running so much faster. And I know this happens a lot of times in situations where I'm working with people, especially where there's a lot of emotion going on, there's a lot of angst, people have got the bit between their teeth and they're running with it, and they're mad about the situation or something that's gone wrong. When you actually can hear them out, listen, slow down, and then ask them some questions to clarify, to get all the data, then again, that can help minimise the opportunity that there may be there for misunderstanding or leaving important information out. Lastly, listen to the meaning in what they've said. What are they really concerned about? It's the next layer, it's the deepest layer. What's behind this call? Are they really wanting a chat and a sounding board, or are they really scared and they're worried that their new plans are not as good as their old ones, and they just need some reassurance, especially if it's the 3rd or 4th conversation that you may have had about this. If you're somebody who's like, I've already talked about this to you, we've already talked through the dates, we've already talked through the plans, and they're ringing you again, it's like, what is it that they're really worried about? What is it? And that's where it's about, again, asking some really good questions, which we'll talk about next. And then maybe getting to the situation where they go, wow, I do actually just feel heard, and I do feel comfortable that the important points have been communicated. It really can open up deeper and more valuable conversations, and there's been a lot of people that have been feeling very alone, whether it's been because they've been in shutdown or quarantine or whatever that is. And so depending on that person's style, they may well be absolutely desperate, and they may need some further help. You may need to recommend that they go and talk to somebody else if you think that they're really stressing too much. And also about bills, paying bills. As we all know, this is a really difficult time for a lot of people, And for yourselves included, I'm sure it's a really uncertain and stressful time. So it's also not just about talking to the clients and your staff, but it's also making sure that you're listened to and you're heard, and you can ask some of these questions that you need to get a bit more certainty or comfort in your life. The next piece I want to talk about, and I've just got a couple more slides now, is asking smart questions. So I also call these high gain questions. And if you're familiar with the SMART acrostic, as they call it, in relation to key performance indicators, asking high gain questions, it's the same. It's using the same principles. It's asking specific questions. It's asking questions about time and about data and about parameters and facts. Make sure that it is actionable. Make sure they are actionable for you. And if you can't do it, who else do you need to get involved?
Sorry, Joe, I'm just jumping in.
Need to do that you need to.
Sorry, Joe,
as well as
I'm just jumping in. We lost sound there for a second, so I don't know if you just want to go back a couple of sentences.
which bit was it that you missed me? Was it, should I start at the beginning of the SMART?
Yeah, I think start at the beginning of the slide. Sorry about that, everybody. Internet isn't our friend today.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so just talking about SMART questions, as also known as high gain questions. These are actually very similar to what you use for your key performance indicators. They need to be specific. So specific questions around what is it that you need to know. If there are measurable pieces that need to be measurable, dollars, facts, information, parameters, etc., get that information, because then you can again tick those off. What's actionable by you? If sometimes people can ask something of you that you just can't do. You just need to be really clear about that and say, well, I can only action this part of it, I can't action that part of it. And that comes into the realistic part as well. What is realistic? What are their expectations or requirements or questions or desirables, I guess, that are realistic or not? And what are the timeframes that are around that? So rather than just asking general questions, when you hop off the phone, you go, oh, I didn't really get all the information I need. And I'm sure a lot of you do this because I probably should have said at the beginning, I don't mean to tell anybody here how to suck eggs, or because a lot of you, I'm sure, have been in the business for many years and you do this incredibly well. It's just, I guess, a reminder sometimes, especially if we are having those difficult conversations and we do just need to take a step back. So high gain questions, get you the information that you need, get that person feel they've been heard so you can all move on. And my last slide is around setting realistic expectations. I guess this is when you are or aren't at work. Set some boundaries. This could be some ways of doing this. Not all of them, but some suggestions. Especially now that a lot of people are working from home, the work day can stretch out. So as an example around setting boundaries, you may be writing email responses to your clients and things late at night, and then they're worried about something. They see an email come on into their inbox. They go, oh, so-and-so's still awake. I'll just give them a quick call. Hopefully not too many people do that, but I do know that it can be really easy for people, especially if they're feeling concerned and they're really identifying with that client and the challenges they're having, to sometimes loosen your boundaries, I guess. The problem with that is you can end up getting very burnt out, and you can end up really teaching people to do things that later on you go, oh, I shouldn't have let them do that, because now they're doing it all the time. You're setting up a new expectation, and when you don't meet that expectation ongoingly, there's a lot of disappointment. If you do feel that you're dealing with people around the world and there's other time frames or other time zones that you need to deal with, obviously you do need to work a way out to deal with that, but that's probably something the business needs to discuss if it hasn't already, and set up a structure to do that. So the reality is we allow what we teach. What we allow, we teach. So just be really aware of what you allow. Determine what you can control and understand what they can control. So the fact that there's been so many in the last few months. A lot of my clients, I'm talking to them, especially around staffing issues. As an example, they might say to one of their staff members, oh, this is what's happening about JobKeeper, or this is what's happening about annual leave, or this is what's happening about shutdown or opening up or whatever. Next minute, the laws change, the regulations change. State government makes a new law, like, for example, about Melbourne. They were opening up, now they're having to close down again to a certain degree. So it's really important, again, to be clear on what you can control and what you can't control, as well as what your clients can and can't control. And once you're clear on that, again, you're going to, it enables you to meet and set those realistic expectations rather than over-promising. And talking about over-promising, this can lead to under-delivering. So consider what other resources maybe need to put in place to support the work needing to be done. Who else in the team can you get involved? If people are sort of sitting around twiddling their thumbs a little bit from time to time, think of what else needs to be done around the place. What else can be worked on? What skill sets do people have? What interests do they have? And how can you leverage that to get the best from them, and also to make your processes and your systems more smooth and more efficient, I guess. What can be upskilled? What additional technology and systems can you use, or might you want to get access to manage your workflow more effectively? New technology is coming out all the time, and continuing to learn from each other can really help with continuous improvement so that you can streamline your processes. And the last point is communication, frequently, and both internally and externally. So internally with your team, one of the really important things is to keep your team updated. For those of you that have got what we're calling a distributed workforce at the moment, you may have people working from home around the state, around the country, around the town, whatever, please make sure that you communicate with them regularly. Even if you haven't got much to say, just touch base so that they're supporting you, so that you're supporting them, and that everybody can continue to know what's going on. Because the problem is, it's like, I liken it to weeding a garden. You can weed a garden and get all the undesirable information or weeds or gossip or facts or whatever out. But unless you plant it back with the information that you actually intentionally want, then all sorts of stuff just grows back again. So, you know, use different sources. Use emails, use webinars, use newsletters. You pick the phone up and talk to people just to keep them informed and make sure that they know what to expect from you and when, and just to keep them updated. I think that the last point, though, that I do want to make is that remember that you can never please everybody all of the time. But if you ask for feedback and if you ask for input and you communicate regularly, at least you're going to have a much better chance of meeting people's expectations. And rather than waiting for complaints, you can be proactive and respond rather than just react when a situation happens. I know that a lot of these things are probably very ideal when, speaking very idealistically, when there's a lot of stress in people's businesses and your businesses at the moment. But I'm hoping that you know, this information that I've just given you can give you at least some ideas of how to address some of these difficult conversations a little more effectively and usefully, and give yourself a little bit more comfort, as well as providing your staff and your clients with some more comfort. So thank you. These are my contact details if anybody would like to have a conversation. Hope that's been useful.
Wonderful, Jo. Thank you so much. I definitely found myself reflecting on my need to be a better listener. I certainly need to practice sacred listening and make sure I use my 2 ears and my 1 mouth in that proportion.
Absolutely. That's exactly right, isn't it? When you're going into a conversation at least for the first little while, turn the ears off, turn the ears on and the mouth off.
Definitely. And then I've really been doing a lot of work as well, this is me personally, around first seeking to understand. And I'll just open the floor up to questions. Guys, please use the question toolbox to ask any questions. And while we do that, I might just have some dialogue with Jo. But we all view the world, don't we, Jo, from our own perspective. And it's really important in all engagement to really understand the perspective of the other person so that you can respond to and meet their needs. And I've been really focusing on that. And it's amazing how you can build a different rapport with someone when you understand their objectives and their perspective.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. And I mean, the key thing about it is recognizing that it's sometimes we can make everything about us, and it's very easy to make everything about us. But the reality is that our clients are so important, and they're our lifeblood, and our staff are our lifeblood. And just taking a little bit more time and asking some more of those deep questions and doing the deep listening can really it just opens, as I mentioned, just opens up a wider, deeper conversation and much better feeling between everybody. And because we all have those different styles, and those are just guidelines, but it might, hopefully it's just given a few people a chance to understand that if somebody does react angrily, or they want more information, and they've rung me 4 times and this is the 5th time and they're still asking me the same question, rather than going, gosh, they're a pain, sit there and go, well, what is it that they're still not hearing, or what is it that they still need from me? Because if their style is quite different to yours, and you're rushing ahead with your 20,000 things to do, and they may be sitting at home and worrying, it's about understanding that taking a few minutes time here might be the difference between them not ringing you again because they have been heard and understood. So that questioning and that deep listening just enriches the whole conversation. And when you do it, generally they will respond in kind.
Yeah, very, very wise. We do have a question here from Claudia, and she would like some of your suggestions, Joe, on how would you go about shutting down frequent interrupters in a respectful way?
In context of
probably having a conversation with someone, I think, Joe, and guys, I must apologise. I'm having a webcam issue, so that's why you can't see me today. So apologies for that.
So I think that if somebody's interrupting you the whole time, I think it's finding a need. Well, they either need to really talk, and so it's about just shutting up and listening, and because they really may be feeling that you're not hearing them, or that they need to talk it in their mind. I know sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm talking things in my mind, and I'm really passionate about something, and I'll keep jumping in and out of the conversation. And it's actually in the process of talking and interrupting that I'm actually finding my own solutions. And so I think sometimes you can, if it is an interrupting person and you're really needing to get clear information from them, I'd just sit there and listen to them for a minute, and then at an appropriate time I'd say, I've got 3 or 4 key questions for you, and then just take back that control of the conversation and say, I just need to ask you this question, and this question. So don't make it a long, rambling conversation. If you've got 10 questions to ask them 2 questions, short, sharp, get them to answer you, and then step out, give them the space if they need to ramble for a little bit longer, and then step back in and go, 1 or 2, ask 2 or 3 questions more. If you haven't got that time and you really do need to get things done, think of a different way of getting those questions answered. Maybe it's sending them an email or a text and saying, can you please answer these 3 or 4 questions for me? So it's actually about dealing with that in different ways. And it could be because you're in a rush or your style is just short, sharp, and you just can't deal with somebody who needs to yak on and interrupt all the time. So if you don't have the time to sit there and listen and give them some space to step into, to say everything they need to say, and then and then there's a natural break in the conversation generally, and you'll be able to step back in and take over again. If you don't have that, then I would probably say, look, I'm a little bit short of time, or you can even do that at the beginning of the conversation. Set a time expectation of a conversation and say, I've got 5 things I need to ask you, and I've only got 10 minutes to do it in, or something similar to that. And then that again is likely to help manage that interrupting conversation.
True, and I have found that rephrasing or paraphrasing what they've said really helps them feel heard. So I've heard that you've said this, and this. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Remembering we can only speak a certain number of words, but our brains are going much faster. So, you know, you've told me these 3 things. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that? That's, you know,
and which are your priorities too?
Yeah.
Interestingly, we do live now in a time where we get customers come in store, but then also Facebook and online. And I've had Deborah here say, well, you know, there are Facebook people who are constantly interrupting and constantly messaging, and I guess how would you go about managing those? I think for me personally, I'd probably have a constant reply and get them to pick up the phone or come in. You can now do automated replies through Facebook back to customers. But Jo, any comments on perhaps managing people who message through Facebook?
So again, I think it's about setting that expectation, and there's no doubt that Facebook has really, I guess, accelerated people's expectation of being responded to immediately. And again, I think it does very much come back to what you suggested, Jo, putting an automated message on there saying, you know, we're dealing with other client questions at the moment. If you need to get hold of us, please pick the phone up or come to see us. We will monitor this site does get monitored a number of times a day. So you're actually really declaring your boundaries and setting up that expectation. But it's also about, if just because people are always, it's like me, for example, I'll write a note and I'll pick up an email because I'll be doing some work at 8 o'clock at night or something. I'll pick an email up and then I'll respond immediately, or I'll respond to a Facebook post or something. But my expectation is not that that person is going to get back and respond to me immediately either. So it's about remembering that it's when the person asks you something, it's often in their time frame, but they don't necessarily expect an answer immediately. So again, it's about clarifying, when do you need this by, or, you know, can we have a conversation about this, or can we talk about this at Facebook about this tomorrow at 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever that is. It's all about setting boundaries and expectations and remembering that you don't let other people manage you. You've got to, when you can, you've got to manage other people and set those expectations, because if you do start responding to a Facebook message every time one comes up, that's what the expectation is. And so unless you've got somebody sitting there who's going to do that every minute of every day, or you're okay about being interrupted 10 times a day and you're happy to respond, that's fine. Just be aware that what you allow, you teach.
Yeah, that's really wise. Deborah's just made a note here. She didn't think of that, so thank you. Max has a question. Max has a question here around politely and tactfully engaging with clients, or when you engage with clients, and you know you've asked them to read documents and you send it to them so that they're fully informed, but then the client doesn't actually read it and is constantly asking the same questions, or and wasting the time of the agent who says, well, I've already sent that to you in an email, or I've sent that to you in a document, and the customer's like, oh, well, I never read that. It does waste time and get annoying for the agent. So what's a way that perhaps the agent can manage that in a way that's respectful to their clients? It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a good one. I think it's probably understanding the importance of that information. And it's also about expecting, I guess it's setting that expectation again around, you know, this is information. In order to help you, I need you to answer these questions before I can help you further. So it's almost putting it back onto them is a suggestion. Putting it back onto them and saying, look, I need you to be aware of these 2 key points. So some people cannot either read a big long document because they just can't. They may be dyslexic. They may be they don't have the time. They don't understand the importance of it. English may not be their first language if it is in English or whatever. So I think it's about asking the question as to, look, I've sent that information to you. Can I please understand? You know, do I need to provide it to you in a different format, or just trying to understand why they maybe haven't read that, and then maybe just pull out the key the key documents. What a lot of people do is they have a document and then they have a summary of the key points. And sometimes, you know, the executive summary, I guess. And I know myself, if I sit down in front of one of these big long documents, I go, oh my God, do I really need to read that? Because I'd far rather somebody gave me the document, but pulled out the key 10 things that I actually need to know or understand. That's a suggestion anyway.
Well, I really like the idea of emphasizing at the beginning around the importance of it. So perhaps the customer doesn't understand the importance of reading the terms and conditions or reading the full itinerary. So I think naming the game and setting up that front and say these documents are really important, you must read them, might put some impetus.
Maybe there's my interrupting thing. Sorry. maybe it's actually about explaining the why. So it's not just saying this is really important, but this is why, because it could impact on your ability to get a refund at a later date if you have to change something, or it could change this or impact that. So you pull out, understand from them what their drivers and motivators are, and then pull out one key point. And if you hit the nail on the head, they'll go, oops, I better read that because I don't want to lose money, or I don't want to have this happen, or I don't want to have that happen, something like that. So maybe that might help too.
Yeah, I really like that, Joe. I think that's really valuable advice, educating about the why. We have a question here from Kate, who said, you know, how do you stop a threatening or abusive conversation?
So that's a really great question. And what I normally would say is, if it's one of your staff members dealing with it, and you're the principal agent or business owner or whatever, you need to talk about this with your team to say, if this happens, this is how we're going to manage it. The reality is that, you know, if we look at Safe Work Australia, everybody has the right to have a safe and healthy workplace, and that also includes no bullying or harassment, etc. So it's about, again, understanding, are they being like that because they are really scared about something? Is there something that they're really concerned about? So I'd say, is there something really concerning you that we need to understand, that we can answer your question more precisely or clearly or properly? Because we don't, we don't tolerate rudeness or bullying. That's not acceptable. So please, come back to us when, when you have identified what it is you need to know, and then we can deal with that question. But it's not good enough for anybody to have to put up with that type of behaviour. It's not acceptable. But at least give them a chance to explain themselves. And if they're not prepared to do that, I'd just say, look, can you please call me back in half an hour, and tomorrow or something, because when you've cooled down, because this behaviour is not acceptable. If it gets to that stage, that's what I'd do. I'd just take control of it. You don't need clients like that. If there's not a key reason for it, or you can't find that, or they're not willing to share with you, and I understand that at times that might be money out of your pocket. So that's where you need to determine what is acceptable or not. But the problem again is what you allow, you teach. So if you allow people to treat you like that, then unfortunately they may well continue.
Yes, and I do know in the after office it's not uncommon that we may get an irate traveller, and the after team have the authority to terminate the conversation. So we would say something along the lines of, we respect you and respect all after staff. Unfortunately, because of the language that you're using, I'm going to have to terminate the conversation now. If you would like to call back at a different time, we can continue the conversation, and then we simply hang up on them. So you shouldn't have to take abuse from people. It's inappropriate.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's about setting your own boundaries and being safe yourself and in your own business, because nobody in business should have to put up with that and cope with that. And if it's just like, and if you're not feeling safe, then, and you feel that it's somebody that's come in off the street and they're abusing you like that to your shop, then you need to find a way of having somebody nearby or something that can actually support you if you're feeling threatened. It's about making sure that you're safe.
Definitely. And I do think it's at this time where many of us are having difficult conversations, it is good to perhaps have some scripts. And we got a question from Kim around, is scripting responses for staff a good idea? So definitely. And even if you have time to role play and practice how you would answer some of the difficult questions, that's a really good idea.
I think it's remembering though that everybody's different. So I think scripting can be useful in that type of emergency situation or really high energy or aggressive situation. I really think scripting can be really helpful. But I personally, I have a problem with scripting in some situations where it's important to recognise that there are different approaches. So I think if you're going to develop scripts or role plays, it's quite a good idea to plan to respond to a variety of situations and a variety of styles, rather than try and fit everybody in the one picture or the one style, because that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe listing some key messages to get across might be a good idea. So rather than strict scripting.
Yeah, and I think, yes, it is. It's about, because all of us are individuals, and you can tell when people go from natural flowing conversation to a script. And so in the situation where you need to manage or shut down a conversation, that can be very helpful. But I think if you're trying to open up the conversation, then scripting a particular script probably doesn't help, but having a variety of key messages or key points can possibly help, especially if you've got less experienced staff or you're feeling a little nervous about the situation.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. And I think we've got time for one more question, and this one's from Rosemary. She said that, and I guess we all love our clients, but sometimes they forget boundaries and they think that we work 7 days a week. So what is a polite way to put some boundaries so that the client realizes that there is appropriate times to have the conversation, and that, you know, that maybe not contacting your travel agent on a Sunday afternoon if they're closed?
So that comes down to that thing I mentioned in the setting clear expectations and setting boundaries for yourself. It actually comes down more to self-management in that situation, and recognizing that just because somebody says jump, you don't have to say how high and then jump. It's about basically putting clearly on your website or on your door or in your newsletters or whatever it is. This is the hours in which we are available, unless it's an emergency. And if it's an emergency, I'll probably let it go to a message bank, and then depending on what the message bank message says, then respond or not until Monday. But it really all comes down to setting expectations and managing yourself and your own need to please, I suppose, because a lot of us, we do love our clients and we need to please, but it comes back to the question before about Facebook. You know, we don't, just because somebody asks us a question, we don't necessarily have to respond right then and there, unless it is an emergency and we've given them that permission. So I would suggest that you make very clear what your hours are for normal interaction, and then what the process is for urgent or emergency interaction after hours. That's what I would do. And that's what I do, I guess. I mean, I have clients contact me at all times, but if it's after like 6 o'clock at night, unless I know it's something really urgent, I don't respond until the next day. So it's about teaching yourself and managing yourself as much as it is about managing your clients.
Yeah, and that's good advice, because we do have many agents that are sole traders and are mobile and work from home. And so I liked your advice there about we do also need to set our own boundaries.
Because, I mean, you know, we're a whole people, right? And as much as we love our work, the part of the challenge then is that we risk missing out on all the other things that are happening in our lives to look after our clients. And our clients, I'm sorry to say this, but our clients don't care, or they're just thinking about themselves, right? So it's up to us to think about ourselves and our family and our situation and put boundaries around that. Otherwise, we can end up really burning out or becoming quite unwell, and that ongoing stress. And this is what my major concern is going forward in this whole working from home situation, it's fantastic because it may give people 2 or 3 hours extra in a day because they're not having to commute. But the other point of it is that it also means that it can be very difficult for some people to switch off, because if they love their work too, and you love your work, that's fine, it's absolutely wonderful. But again, you still need to set boundaries, because we should be multi-dimensional people, not just work. And so that's where the whole honouring ourselves as people is important, and our own self-worth.
Yeah, and so Rosemary, perhaps in your situation, it may be not picking up the phone if they call after hours.
Yep.
If they send you a text message, perhaps you
Answer it.
I was going to say, perhaps you could have on your phone, just under your notes section, an automated message which goes, "Hey, thanks for contacting me. I will get back to you at 9 a.m. when I start working," and then you can start to train them. So at start, maybe you acknowledge that they're contacting you, but train them at when your business hours are. And to make it easy for you, you just have that template and you can copy and paste it into your text message, or you just have an automated response on your email out of hours, something like that. But then it's also much for you to step away and not feel guilty, and realize that you need time to yourself. So it's out of hours and I'm not going to respond. I will wait till tomorrow morning and then respond first thing. That's totally fine.
And you know, Jo, sorry if I know we're run out of time, but in that, it sounds to me, and I'm assuming, but it could be that, Rosemary, you're that style of an influence style. So for you, it's really important to have that social recognition, to be connected, and to have friendly relationships. So that's what I was talking about before, about when I talked about the whole DISC model. It's actually about being aware of our own style and how those conversations and interactions impact us as much as it does impact our clients. So that's where it's more important. It's just as important for us to set our own boundaries, to manage ourselves and train ourselves as our clients, and go, it's okay if I don't get right back to them. They're still going to love me tomorrow, you know, we're all good.
Yeah, very true. Now, I know I said last question before, but I do want to have ask you one more question, Jo. This is something that I think many members will experience, and this question's come in from Kate, who's asked, you know, when a customer calls you and you give them a solution and they're not happy with your response, they will often demand to talk to your manager, but you know your manager is going to give the same response that you do. How would you stop them, or how would you manage that person going, well, I'm not happy with this, I want to speak to your manager?
How would I manage that? So I would probably be quite likely to say something like, we get these questions and these requests often, and we work as a team, and we develop solutions as a team, and therefore this is basically the response. This is just one potential answer anyway.
No, I like it.
You know, we work as a team. We develop solutions as a team, and I'm happy to pass you to my manager, but you're likely to hear exactly the same thing from her, because, you know, we have developed these solutions all together. That's one option. And maybe it's also about asking more questions about why they may feel that that's not the best answer, and is there another option that they can suggest, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think I like that idea. Yeah.
I think for me it would be
that team idea.
Yeah. I think the team, and then that might help people realise, well, you're not just an island in this. You know, there is a team, and you discuss these types of scenarios frequently, and this is the solution that you've come up with as a team, and your manager's part of that team. So,
yeah, and something like through COVID, there are certain business policies that have been developed by the business, and all staff are communicating this to the clients, etc. Yeah, I really like that approach. I think it's a really great idea. I might even use that, Jo.
Feel free.
Well, we are all out of time. Jo, wonderful presentation, and I've had so many comments come in. For everybody on the webinar today, when I end the webinar, a question and answer will pop up on the screen. Please take the time to fill that out. We'll send that to Joe, and Joe gets a sense of how much you enjoyed today. Was it relevant for you and your business? If you don't get time to answer it today, you will get an email in your inbox tomorrow asking the same questions, and would really appreciate it if you could take the time to do that. Connect with Joe on LinkedIn. Sorry, Joe, go on.
I was just going to say that feedback for people like us is really, really invaluable. So please, doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, or whatever, but because, you know, it's really important for me, you know, particularly I want to know that the content that I'm giving to people is relevant. And thank you to those that ask questions, because that, I guess, that sort of gives me a bit of an indication that we're on the right pathway. But I really do, I really value your feedback. So please I really do encourage you to fill it in, because that would be great for me. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Jo is on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with her. Her email is on this PowerPoint slide, so if you'd like to reach out to her directly, and she does consulting for different businesses, so perhaps she could work with you and your teams if there's a specific area that you'd like to work on with her. She has a new website coming soon, but you're also free to jump onto that and look at the type of work that Jo does. Joe, thank you so much again. Really fantastic. Apologies, everybody, for my webcam not working today, but this webinar recording will be on the website, so please share it amongst your team. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
And hang in there, guys. It's got to get better.
Definitely, Joe.
Thank you so much for letting me talk. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joe. Bye, everyone.